Hello everyone, this is Joshua from Platypus Kingdom, and welcome to a different type of video. Today we're going to be reviewing a movie, and before I get into this, I just got home from the theater. I got to see an early showing of this movie, so because I really want to get this review out there as fast as possible, this whole review is going to be this one image. So if you want to just file your taxes, drink coffee, look up stories about how many kids are getting attacked by animals, that's fine. Do your thing. I'm sorry, but it's late. I don't really have the time to edit together clips or my face. That takes a long time, believe it or not. So we're gonna just roll with this. So yes, as you probably saw by the title or the big freaking image on the screen. Good job, Josh. We're gonna be reviewing Finding Dory, the brand new summer blockbuster of Pixar, everybody's favorite animation company. Well, maybe I'd put them and DreamWorks about the same level. This is gonna be unedited too. This will be fun. So, let's go ahead and give some background. Clearly, this is a sequel to the original Finding Nemo that came out, I think it was 2002. I don't remember what year it came out, but I do remember I was a big fan when the film first came out. I gotta stop saying came out. But I was very into Finding Nemo. I saw the film a lot when I was a kid. I got a lot of the Happy Meal toys. I played the video game on my computer to death. And I got a lot of the plushie toys from the Disney store that used to be in my town, RIP. And wow, way to sound professional. Use the word RIP in your video. I am so sorry. I'm getting off topic. I'm very tired. This is a horrible video. But I loved it. Needless to say, I thought it was a good film when I was a kid, and to this day, I still have a good respect for it. Finding Nemo, to give a short synopsis, it's a very fun, very energetic and adventurous, emotionally driven adventure. I used adventure twice. I'm sorry. It's a great action adventure comedy film that was released by Disney Pixar. It's probably one of their strongest. It's just beautiful. The way that the film is animated, you get lost in this magic of the ocean. That's one thing I really remember about Finding Nemo, was how the world around me when I was watching this movie just seemed to, I felt like I was just in this wonderful, it made the ocean seem so majestic, so full of life, even though it looked so barren. Like, that's the cool part about it. And it didn't need to be like Shark Tale, where there were civilizations and, an economy. It just existed, and you understood that it existed because it made sense. It didn't really need to rely on any sort of logic other than what just made sense. The film had a lot of attention to detail. I just loved it. To this day, I still highly regard the film. I really enjoy the characters, and I was happy. But if I ever thought about a Finding Nemo 2, even as a kid, I thought, you can't really do that. But clearly Disney Pixar proved me wrong with Finding Dory, the long-awaited, I guess, sequel to Finding Nemo, where Dory is now the central character, and she is finding her long-lost family. I was very split with this movie. I'll come out and say that. Pixar has a very questionable track record with its sequels. For instance, I love Toy Story 2. 3 is pretty good, but Toy Story 2 is amazing in my opinion. It's one of my favorite films, at least sequel-wise. And I'd say it's my favorite out of the Toy Stories. Monsters University was okay. I like a lot of parts of it a lot, and I think it's honestly, I think people are really way too hard on Monsters University. I thought it was a fine film. But then you have movies like Cars 2, which is abysmally bad, because as much as I love the original Cars, it's one of my favorites. I hate the sequel with such a strong passion. It's up there in like the top. I think it should be put in the top 50 like worst animated films, just because of how widely Pixar missed the mark on that one. And Finding Dory, from the advertising, seemed to follow a fairly similar setup. you giving the side character the center stage. What's gonna happen? Not to mention that you're kind of going out of your element, and the shift of focus has definitely changed. I wasn't sure. A part of me felt like it could be really good, and a part of me felt like it could possibly be terrible. I didn't know if there could be an in between, and I tried to stay away from advertising as well, because advertising for Finding Dory was everywhere, but I really didn't give into it. All the trailers I saw were in theaters, and that was only like the same trailer maybe twice, I think. I think I saw the first teaser once, but nonetheless, I went to see it. I just got back, and my honest opinion is that Finding Dory is good. I won't say it's very good, but it is way better than Cars 2, and it's better than Monsters University. It's a good sequel. This is how I wish more sequels were done. Not all sequels, but this is a good example of how to do a sequel correctly. You're expanding on what your original film did. You're taking things a step further. You're continuing the story, not rehashing it. And I like that. So, this film, I'll tell you what I liked and what I didn't like. It took me 6 minutes to get to this part. I am so sorry. I'm surprised if you're still watching. Let's talk about the good. First off, this film is beautiful. The first thing is that the film starts out, before it even starts, there's a short film like there is with every Pixar film. But this one didn't really feel like a story. It felt kind of more like an animation test. But it's a good one. I won't spoil it, but it's about a bird and an ocean, and it's beautiful. There were parts where I thought it was live action. It looked so good. I don't think I've ever seen any CGI technology look this good. I mean, I thought How to Train Your Dragon 2, or there's this one other movie, I can't remember, but with another film, like Big Hero 6 or Frozen, they were really pushing the boundaries or Lego Movie, for instance, they were pushing the boundary for what CGI can do, but this was phenomenal. Like, this is the closest I've seen us come, and I cannot wait for 10 years from now when that technology looks obsolete. What are we going to be seeing then? Hold on. But that aside, Finding Dory, does look really good. The movie has a wonderful color palette. It's very different in the choices of colors that it uses. It's very vast, and it's just pretty to look at. The textures, the way the characters move, the attention to detail, the world around you is very nice. I was just so... When I wasn't enjoying a scene, I took it upon myself to just appreciate the animation that was in front of me, because it was really good. So, good on you, Pixar. The film looks phenomenal. I also did like the story. The story, I got nervous at first. I will say the beginning of this film is kinda misleading, because it starts off very strong emotionally. I wouldn't say it's like on par with Up, but it does dip right after that. And, it has a very strong opening, but it does dip. And you can really tell where, because the film starts to go into this sort of misleading kind of energy and mood that kind of gave me the wrong impression of what type of movie I was in for, but not too bad. For the most part, the film is very focused on comedy. And that's neither a criticism or a praise, it's just kind of a thing. And, that's what Cars 2 did. It was very focused on comedy, but this did it right. But, I saw this in a theater with Stewie and then a whole family down in front of us, and Stewie and the adults of the family were laughing harder than the children were. Now, I wasn't laughing that much because I have a very dry sense of humor, But there was this one scene. I laughed at a few jokes, but there's one scene. I won't give it away, but it involves a clam. I have never laughed that hard in a movie theater. I was crying. I was just. I don't know if anybody's gonna find that scene as funny as I do, but I was in absolute tears. I just thought that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in an animated movie in my entire life. I loved it. But the movie does a very clever trick with its story. As I said, the main focus of the film is Dory finding her parents, and it's kind of a mystery. And the mystery may be a little bit simpler than what I was originally thinking, so don't really set your sights too high, but the whole thing is kind of piecing things together. And it's hard to say whether it's a good or bad piecing together, because there were parts where I'm like, yeah, I kind of thought that'd be obvious, but there were very few parts like that. I'm sorry, that was a very moot point. I apologize. But they did a very clever thing, I thought, in the beginning, where you see Dory with her parents, and they give you an idea of how they got separated, but they don't show it. So when Dory has these revelations about her family and her memory, you're just as interested as she is, because you're like, oh, that's another piece of the puzzle fitting together. And as the film goes on, you'll be like, oh, this, and this. And eventually when it all comes to a close, I gotta admit, there's a part in this movie, there are parts in this movie, I should say, that are really strong, and when it all comes together, it really makes for a very strong moment, and I was very impressed. There wasn't a whole lot of that really strong emotion that you might be used to, because it's been a while since Pixar really broke my heart. Like, Toy Story 3's ending was pretty rough. So was, I argue that Up's beginning was probably the worst. But it's been a while since Pixar did that. Finding Dory, I mean, Inside Out had some moments, but Finding Dory, I'm sad to say, did not have that moment where I was just like, darn you, Pixar. But there is a moment in this film where, you know, everything goes downhill, everything goes wrong, the characters are at their lowest. That part was dark, and I will admit, I was shocked at how messed up things got. Now, that being said, the story is very lighthearted. It is very bouncy and energetic. It's not as serious as the last film, so if you're expecting an emotional roller coaster, you're really not going to get it. There are some good relationships, there are some good characters, and there's a lot of fun to be had with Finding Dory. And there's a few very heartwarming moments, and that did make me happy. And the movie ends. I'll get back to this later, because this is a very big part of the movie for me. But the story is very strong at parts. I'm trying to think of what else I really did like. Even if it was very comedy focused, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm very happy that this film didn't go too far off the beaten path than you'd expect. There is a much bigger focus on comedy, but I was talking to Stewie on the way home, and I brought up that this is kind of the movie I wanted Penguins of Madagascar to be. Penguins of Madagascar was a film that came out almost 2 years ago, and it was a spin-off of the Madagascar series, and I hated it. I thought it was it's probably in my top 10 most hated movies. It was awful, in my opinion. If you like that movie, I respect your opinion. I can see why you'd like it, and I'm glad that you do. But in my opinion, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying that I personally hated it so much, and it gets my blood boiling just to think about it, so I'm not going to go into it. But that being said, I do wish that that movie was more like this one. This movie had a very big focus on adventure, comedy, and some emotional parts, but they weren't too bad to where you get distracted from the bouncy tone of the movie. Maybe that was just me. I know a lot of people were saying that this movie really did get them in the feels. I didn't get that. I can't really name a specific part of this movie where there was one part that really warmed my heart, and I'm telling you, I could feel something in my tear ducts activating, like a dusty old gear shift turning. Not gear. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But I can't really name any parts of this movie that felt like classic Disney just heart. That's not to say there isn't heart. There is some, and it's very welcome and very pretty strong when it is. But for the most part, the movie is a bouncy comedy action adventure type of story, and it is a lot of what I had hoped Penguins of Madagascar would have been like. So it was a welcome surprise because that did Finding Dory managed to relieve that sore spot for me. So thank you, Pixar. That being said, I think I've said that being said way too many times. Altogether, I think that's all the good parts I have to say about this movie. Again, I'm very tired, so I might go back and say, oh, I like this too. But let's get into kind of what I didn't like. I definitely would not say I liked this better than Finding Nemo. I still think Finding Nemo is the better film, but Finding Dory comes close. I still feel like Finding Dory kind of went through an identity crisis, because parts of it felt like it wanted to be that classic Pixar with that really strong emotion, and there were some really strong moments that made me think, I'm back in... Okay, here's something... I'm sorry, I told you I would do this. Another thing I did like about the film was I felt like I was back with my childhood, you know? To hear Marlin's voice, to see Nemo floating around, I felt like... And hear Dory... Dory, played by Ellen DeGeneres, is perfect. She's a great pick for Dory. I kept on forgetting that was her. It was wonderful. I love that portrayal. All the actors in this film do really well. I could not tell who was who when watching this movie, so good on you for that. But it was very nice to be back in this world, and I felt like I was a kid again. So seeing these images, hearing that music, and these voices just took me right back to being a kid. So, yeah. But the negatives about this movie is that it feels like it's trying to be another film that's not connected to Nemo, really. Finding Dory, one of my biggest issues, like I said, Finding Nemo felt like this big mystery when you went to the ocean. It felt like this vast, unexplored world that was so creative and beautiful to just get lost in. Finding Dory ditches that. I don't know if it's spoiling anything, but I will say that a huge portion of this movie, I mean big portion of the movie, doesn't take place in the ocean. And like I'd say maybe 2/3 of this movie take place out of the ocean. So that's a huge chunk of the movie. And that is kind of distracting because you lose that feeling of getting lost in this world of just the ocean doesn't this place that they're in doesn't feel like a place of mystical wonder that Disney's so good at giving you that illusion. It felt, I don't know if it was the way it was designed wasn't that interesting. I don't know if it was just because the setting wasn't that fascinating, but I didn't get that into the setting. I didn't really like that, and I do feel like that detracted from the film a bit. Because even if you wanted to do this setting, okay, but there wasn't a whole ton of there was some creativity, which I did appreciate, but I guess I could have maybe used a bit more of a variety in location. Because it did feel kind of constricted. Nemo, you're going across the ocean, which is a pretty big journey. In Finding Dory, you're going it all kind of takes place in one place. And it's hard to say whether that's a criticism, because Dory understands that you don't need to go bigger to be better. I like that. But and I'm not saying it should have gone bigger. I'm just saying maybe do more with what you're given. I don't know. I also didn't really like how Marlin and Nemo were handled because they are not really supporting characters. They're just very minor characters. They're almost like extras. Like there were parts where Marlin was there, and I kind of felt like he was just sort of going, "Hi, I'm here too. I'm in the movie." And Nemo was just kind of like, "Dad, we're not supposed to be here." And Marlin's like, "Look at me. I'm from the property that you're watching. Remember me, kids?" And Nemo's like, "Dad, we're a dead horse now." And that's weird to talk about fish that way. But I felt like that was really distracting. The new character Hank, he's good, and I like the friendship that was built between him and Dory. But I would have liked if I had to sacrifice. I mean, I know some people are going to agree with me. He was really funny. He was really interesting. I liked his character development, and I was happy that he was in this movie. But if you had to ditch a lot of his screen time for Marlin to be there, I would have been okay. So, again, another personal problem. Maybe that's just because I wanted more of Marlin and Nemo because you didn't really see much of their interaction. You saw a good bit of their interaction in the first one, but not as much because, of the whole reuniting story. Here, you get to see them go on their own little adventure. There's so much room for character development, but there really isn't any. They really don't learn anything by the... Well, Marlin sort of does, but it felt very shoehorned in. And I felt like the movie could have done a lot better if they had given Marlin and Nemo more screen time and more development. Instead, they kind of feel tacked on to the movie. This could have been a prequel, like, to Finding Nemo, and you would have lost almost nothing. So, well, there would have been some continuity issues, but, what else? I know there's some more stuff that I didn't like about the movie as much. I can't seem to name it. I guess all in all, Finding Dory is a fun family film. I'm not saying it's bad. I really did enjoy it. I kind of want to go more into detail. I might do an extra review after I get done here, because this is my first impressions. I did like the movie. I'm glad I saw it. Oh, another complaint. Might be my final one. The climax of the movie is probably the weakest part. The climax of the last film was tense, it was epic, and there was just this really big focus on, the consequences of these actions. This movie doesn't have that. This movie has... The climax of this film almost feels forced. Almost as forced as Marlin and Nemo were. It's a very boring climax, and it's such a shame to say it because I don't want to give it away, but when you hear this concept, you're like, how can that be boring? But it is. It is a very boring, very uninteresting climax, and I just didn't really care about it. Not like I did in Nemo, because to see Nemo and Dory fighting in that net, to be reunited with Marlin, if my memory serves me correctly, some people are going to use that against me. But the ending of Finding Nemo, just to get all the people to break free of the big fishing net, that was epic. And it was really awesome. But this movie, it didn't feel like... This felt like something I'd expect from Blue Sky Studios as a climax. This movie, I don't know. It did not feel epic. It didn't feel like... all the tensions were rising. It didn't feel like everything was coming together. It just felt like, okay, we needed to put this to keep the kids interested. No, you don't need that. Which is a shame, because the scene that came before it was really strong. So, I might do a spoiler review, because I kind of want to talk about that scene. I don't know. We'll see. But, yeah, the film's climax is very tacked on, and I do feel like that does subtract a little bit from the film, because it felt like there was a different story. The story felt kind of lazy around the very end, because it doesn't fall apart by any means. It just loses a lot of its steam. And I am kind of sad to say that. But I was talking to Stewie on the way home, and I mentioned that I wanted the tensions to be higher in the film. I wanted there to be higher stakes. I wanted there to be more consequences for actions. And there really wasn't that. There in Nemo, it felt like a huge epic journey and an adventure, and there were a lot of parts where you were just completely invested. Finding Dory doesn't feel like a big journey. It doesn't feel like an epic adventure. It just kind of felt like if the characters were real. I could kind of imagine Dory saying, I really liked what Marlin did with his story, or what you guys did with Marlin. Here's my story, and I'll pay you this much money to make it. And they just looked at the numbers. They couldn't turn it down. Dory's story is it's not uninteresting. There's some good parts that make it really good, but I just can't put it above the first film, because the first film just knew how to get you invested much easier. And that's not to say you won't get invested in this film, but I'm trying to think of how to explain myself best. It was harder for me to get into this film because around the time of the climax, I didn't feel as invested. I didn't feel like I had quite as much motivation or time to understand this story as I would have liked. I don't know if that's really what I'm trying to say here. A lot of people, I can see the comment section now being, you are an ignorant loser who has no clue what you're talking about. I do, it's just hard to explain. The tensions needed to be higher. That's the main point, is that I wish that there was more at stake, because if there were, and there was a little less focus on comedy and more on getting, because the movie does feel very rushed. Like, the second Dory realizes, hey, I remember my parents, then immediately she's like, I gotta find my parents. And then Marlon's like, you gotta find your parents. She's like, I gotta find my parents. He's like, let's go find your parents. And then boom, you're on your way to find your parents. And there's not a whole lot of time to develop, like, it sounds stupid, but the film tells you that she's finding her parents, but it doesn't tell you why. Now, obviously, you're like, well, of course she wants to find her parents. They're her parents. Well, yeah, and they try to do a scene where Dory's like, yeah, these are my parents. I have to find them. But it feels very rushed. I wanted time to really get to know what Dory was feeling, because I felt like the entire time Dory was just on speed, and she was just constantly going from one place to the next. So by the time the movie was over, I kind of needed to take a breather. And I think that might also be kind of why the tensions weren't as high, because the investment wasn't that strong, because there wasn't as much time to really develop more feelings with the characters. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, and I'm not saying that's right, I'm just saying that's how I felt. But all of these bad points, I think, were made up in the very, very last few seconds of the film. The last 20 seconds of this movie was just the purest Pixar moment I felt in a long time. Without giving too much away again, the movie ends on this very quiet, very peaceful note. And it just filled me with emotion. And at that moment, I turned to Stu and I was like, they should never, ever do a Nemo movie again. And she's like, do you not like this? I'm like, it's not that I don't like this. It's that I can't think of a better way to end it than on this moment right here. And so at that point, I felt like all loose ends were tied up. And that's when I realized Finding Dory is a really good sequel, because it continued the story in a way that made sense, and it knew just when to end, or just how to end, I should say. The ending did go on a little longer, including the climax, than I would have liked, And yeah, there was a huge shift on focus with comedy, and I did not like the setting, but I'm willing to forgive all of that simply because of the really strong note that this movie leaves off on. And Stewie did bring up some good points. She said that the movie does have a few good messages for kids to take away from. Dory is a good role model. She's a likable character, unlike Mater from Cars 2, who, not that I didn't like Mater's character, it's just he can't carry a film. Dory proved that she can. And, I thought from the get-go, when I saw her short-term memory loss, I thought, oh no, this is going to get annoying. It's going to be a complete just joke, recurring joke. She's going to forget stuff. No, she is a great character, and I am very happy that I saw this movie. I don't quite know if I'd go see it again, and I definitely wouldn't say it's better than Finding Nemo, but when it comes to ranking the Pixar sequels, I'd probably say that Dory is right under the Toy Story sequels in terms of quality. I'd go that. Yeah, I'd go that far. Dory, Finding Dory is a great. If you're thinking about going to see this movie and you liked the original, I'd recommend it. Speaking as purely as somebody who really did appreciate the original as a kid and just completely got nostalgic for this one. And if you are looking for a nice summer blockbuster to go check out, it's not a bad one at all. I really can't think of another animated film that's coming out anytime soon that I really want to go see. And if you're looking for a nice film to take the kids to, I'd highly recommend it. It's a nice family film for everybody that you'll all get a kick out of. So, I'll give Finding Dory a 7 out of 10. I know people have been kind of on this big rating score vendetta, and I'll probably ditch my rating scores after a while if I do more of these, which I probably won't because the comment section on this is going to be brutal. But in the long scheme of things, I liked Finding Dory, and I'm glad Pixar made it. Would I have preferred that a few things were changed? Oh yeah. I would have liked if a good amount of the movie was shifted, but the things that are good are so good that I have every right and every willingness to give this movie. Willingness isn't an amount. I speak with sure confidence when I say that Dory was worth finding.